All right, we're here for episode 3 of Red Weather Radio. I am Vertigo. This is my friend Beat, and we're going to be hitting up all of the good topics in politics, society, and culture. How are you doing today, Beat?
I'm doing all right, if a tad tired. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. All right, so we're going to just jump right into our first topic for the night. And the first topic is our first red pill. This is a topic that we've touched on in our personal conversations a little bit in the past, but we've never really gone in depth, partially because I have a lot of difficulty actually remembering what my first red pill was. But yeah, we'll get started with that tonight, and I'll give the floor to you.
Well, I think that's natural. I think it's very uncommon that somebody radically alters their political view or their worldview in a very small or very short period of time, or perhaps with just a single event, really. It tends to be, at least for most, a very gradual process, and those claiming that it wasn't. Of course, there are some who are sincere, but I think with many you might be seeing ulterior motives in their claims, perhaps.
That's a good point. Yeah, those changes, they generally do take quite a bit of time. And as you get older, the saying is that most people get more conservative as they go older, but maybe most people don't become as conservative as us.
Yes, definitely. And I think there's, after a gradual change or throughout that gradual road, you'll find that there are a lot of different outcomes. You'll find some people who will end up as libertarians, some people who end up as traditional conservatives, maybe some will unfortunately end up as sort of Wignat types, or you'll have any number of men, or ANCAPs
Well,
even. Those are a fun lot.
well, some people also become liberals. They start conservative and
Well,
go
that's
left
not a
to
red
get the
pill.
blue
That's a
pill.
blue. Yeah, it's a blue pill.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, if we're talking about gradual change.
Some people, they start hitting the gym. They call that the iron pill.
Oh, well, I should probably take the iron pill, but that pill's a little bit too expensive for me
Oh,
at the moment, so
you don't
I'm
have to
gonna
go to a gym.
hold off
You
on
just
that.
do your push-ups, do your sit-ups.
Yeah, I don't do push-ups or sit-ups. I'm too good for that. I lift some weights. I mean, you can give me a little bit of credit for that.
That I can.
No sit-ups, no push-ups. You know, I also have a dog, so there's dog hair all over the floor, so it's really kind of unsanitary. Even if you lie a towel down or something, it's still the towel, you have to burn it later. But anyway, all right, why don't we go ahead and you start talking about your path to the right.
Oh yeah. So when I first started, it was around high school. I recall I was quite far left-leaning at its worst. It was definitely, it would be in the realms of a socialist. I would have considered myself, but also I had my bouts of nihilism as well, where I didn't have much of any political view, but also a very real nihilism. However, where it began with me, and so this is around when I started becoming, I was quite left-leaning actually. I increasingly become left-leaning, and there was an event that the assassin of a certain New York judge's family, or at least her son, was connected to, and that happens to be the oh so infamous, and rightly so, as it was very cringe, was GamerGate.
Ah, yes, GamerGate, of course. That's been the topic of thousands of hours of
It never goes away.
conversation. It never goes away, and most of the retrospective looks at GamerGate are talking shit
Even
about
by
it because it
people
was
who were on
terrible.
it. Both sides don't look back on GamerGate.
Yeah, nobody. I'm glad to say that at least I had nothing to do with it. I didn't know hardly anything about it. I didn't really actually find out about any specific details until after it was over.
Oh, you're lucky. Trust me, you'll wish you weren't a part of it. You're always reminded of it, and it never quite goes away.
Yeah, well, that's how a lot of political scandals go. You know, no matter how many years separate you from the fact, it's always there to remind you.
Well, in this case, it's not so much that it's a great, or what's what I'm looking for, traumatizing event. It's just really cringe, to be blunt.
Well, I mean, you talk about it like it was a traumatizing event
It was
sometimes.
so stupid.
Well, for the people at home who don't know what GamerGate is, can you elucidate that a little bit for us?
So there was an industry takeover, which was the games journalism, but also a lot of the public side of games development. That is public relations, and this takeover was by very left-leaning individuals. Although it was this manifested in a lot of nepotism and a lot of how do I say, abuses of their positions, and there was a very real backlash, a very sort of chaotic grassroots. What's the word I'm looking for? Uprising is not the right word. That sounds violent, but it was uprising of the keyboard warriors, you could call them, against
Right.
these types. And this, of course, was quite indiscriminate. It wasn't really with any how do I say, positivistic motion or positivistic direction. It was just mostly about lashing out, maybe trying to tear down these how do I say, individuals, compromised individuals, abusive individuals, and that's a long story in itself, and they absolutely were and still are. I mean, the whole thing is horribly corrupt. But then you had these really cringe. I keep using cringe, but I don't know what I'm allowed to say. But I think that's about the extent of the pejorative.
Well, you can say whatever you want.
Well, these very I'll just stick with cringe for now. Keep it civil, since they are
You can call
technically.
them
Are we allowed to say that one? I think we're gonna take it off a lot of
it.
places if we say that one.
I can bleep it out.
Okay, that's an idea. I don't want to give you too much work. But so they were trying to say, well, actually, what all of this is actually about ethics in video games journalism. They tried to make it this noble moral crusade, and they started policing their own. Oh, we have I can't remember what it was called, this GG policing group. And then you had Not Your Shield, which is we're going to own the progressives by being more progressive than them, or or own them at their own game. Oh, look, I'm a GamerGater, but I'm not a white straight male. And yeah, never mind, you just doxed yourself. Okay, that's great. But yeah.
That's interesting that there's that instance of trying to beat them at their own game, because you see a lot of that
Even today
nowadays as well.
Yeah, Democrats are the real conservatives now, apparently.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, that's in reference to who was it? Was it
Jaden McNeil.
Donald Trump? No, Donald Trump Jr.
Oh,
made
yeah, Junior
the
and Ivanka Trump.
tweet. And Ivanka Trump, they tweeted something about Biden not being in favor of gay marriage, right?
In the case of Ivanka Trump, she was going after or attacking Biden on some comments he made, I think in 1982, so well before I was even born. He said that women in the workforce would sort of distort or would take time that women have or mothers have to, take care of their children, that this could have negative ramifications. Was the general gist of what he said. And then,
Funny that.
and then, yeah, the gay marriage one was for Trump Jr., I think it was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's funny. I mean, Jaden, he hit it right on the head. Democrats are the real conservatives.
Which is a hopeless position to hold, and it's a.
Anyway, sorry, I derailed
Oh
a
no,
little
I think
bit
that's
there,
a great
but-
topic in itself. We can definitely, I think, do a segment
Yeah,
on
it's
that
not the
strategy. I
topic,
think
though.
that would be a great topic in the future. That is the strategies of the modern, shall we call it, conservative ink, is what it's tend to be referred to these days. But yes.
Yeah, well, we'll put that on the ledger for episode 4.
Oh yes. So you had this GG, or Not Your Shield it was, and sometimes people would post pictures of themselves. Not always. They would just state that they weren't, straight white male. But of course, if you just put it in text, then they'll never believe you. They'll just say you're lying. And so many went as far as doxing themselves. But that's a smaller thing. Then you had unbelievably, I suppose I'll use a slang word just for comedic effect, but unbelievably autistic offshoots of this sort of GG revolt, which is GamerGate revolt, the splinter of GamerGate that's attacking GamerGate. I don't even remember what they were all about anymore.
Yeah, this is news to me.
And then you had more Mr. Mediocre. That's not a slight against him. That's the actual origin of the name. But he pointed out quite well that it mostly devolved into people just grifting. Oh, hey, hashtag GamerGate, help me buy this thing. Hashtag GamerGate, here's my GoFundMe.
And then what did he end up doing as a result of all of that?
Oh, he just left the whole movement. So he was no.
Yeah, well, didn't he delete his account?
Oh yes, yes. He was known as Internet Aristocrat back then, and he just deleted his entire account. Now people tried to cope with that because he was one of the more prominent members, and so a bunch of GGers who were still, and they lasted years afterwards, just trying to hold on to guys. No, GG's not over. It's still a thing, guys. And they were coping. Oh no, Jim didn't leave because GG became, cringe. He left because of some incident on a live stream of a sexual nature, shall we say, involving his girlfriend. But of course it wasn't, and he's played replays himself. This has been addressed several times.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that you just explained that I had no idea.
Oh, there's so much more. I'm trying to condense it all. I haven't even gone into the Society of Professional Journalism. That was a different, really dumb arc. And then a lot of the big, or somewhat, medium to pygmy YouTubers, perhaps, Sargon of Akkad and such, got their starts in GamerGate, actually. That's where I found out about them. I used to be followers of theirs and such.
All right, well, let me ask you this. What specifically about GamerGate red pilled you?
I think this was the first time I really started to see the censorship that you see so prevalent today, and that's how GamerGate actually first exploded. It was just this mass censorship, for these so this is supposed to be, of course, a patriarch. Everything's supposed to be male-dominated. It's supposed to be oriented against marginalized groups, and yet, at their behest, there was such a sweeping and profound censorship that it even spread to 4chan, and that was completely unprecedented. 4chan was always known for being a very, very, for the most part, hands-off moderation. That was back with Moot, and it turns out that Moot was connected to, I can't remember his connection anymore. I think it was a girlfriend or an ex-girlfriend, or I can't remember what it was. But there was that, and then there was just the blatant hypocrisies I kept seeing. For as much as I bragged on the GG side of things, the other side was really much worse. And you could really see just and the phrase that came around a lot back then was there's no bad tactics, only bad targets, I think it was. And that's when I really started to kind of see that on the left. I started seeing them do a lot of things that I thought were really quite extreme, that I would never have condoned, that I thought we were above, and talking about that or calling it out was also quite frowned upon. And then also that's when I got exposed to the enlightened centrists, and I thought their videos made a lot of sense, and I started subscribing to them and following them a lot back then, because I was not I don't mean this as a slight against them, but I was a much dumber person. I didn't read at all, and I just kind of just listened to what people were saying. That was my whole
I'm in that boat too.
Oh, I think everybody, especially these days, tends to, how do I say, begin at that point. I was explaining this to someone else not too long ago, that what really is quite difficult about getting initiated into this stuff is about knowing how to, and then knowing what to read, what to look into, and so forth. Effort is one thing, but equally important is also how to direct that effort. Otherwise, you'll be expending copious amounts of effort for very little gain.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, all right, that's where you began your journey, and then following that, how did it change? Because when you were subscribed to enlightened centrist channels, you weren't as far to the right as you are now.
I called myself center left. I was the real liberal, you see.
Oh, the real liberal! Yeah, I love that.
That was the craze back then. I remember.
That really was. I remember that when that was the craze.
I had uttered that as well, and then I had such brilliant insights. Socialism is illiberal. Oh, no.
Oh wow! Oh, those are some real hot takes there.
Indeed.
Well, I mean, I was in the same boat. I didn't really talk to people about politics, so I never uttered these words. But I imagine that I came across the same thoughts more times than once, more times than I like to admit.
Oh, absolutely. And I was in a bit in the opposite boat. So with me, when I started, when I would hear something interesting, and this carries on a lot later, when I would read a new book about something, I found it interesting. I'd sort of just autistically ramble about it to everyone, right down to just the most awkward settings where I'm talking about why the Soviet Union chose RBMK nuclear reactors over the water-cooled VVER models.
Yeah, that's
explaining that to
Greek to me.
I'm explaining that to a woman who doesn't speak English or speaks as a second language in a cafe, and she's just lost.
Yeah, I can imagine.
She spoke very good English, and she was, leaning to my friend. I could speak English. She's saying in their native language. But what is he talking about? I can't catch any of it.
Yeah, I never had anything like that.
Yeah, it's
I never talked to anybody about politics.
I can control it now, but back then, as I mentioned, just uncontrollably and autistically, I'd just ramble on about these things.
Well, thankfully, you don't have to control it that much here. You can just cut loose, let it ride, and see where it goes. And if it ends up being too long, I'll just I'll just cut it in post.
All right, I appreciate that. You might have to. I don't want to give you too much work, but then also I don't want to. There's things that'll get us banned and taken off the air quite quick as well. You have to be careful and selective with what you talk about and how you frame it as well.
Oh, yes, I'm sure. I don't really love the idea of being censored, so I'm probably gonna have to cut a lot of what I say out of these podcasts, but no, let's not worry about that right now. We'll continue on with our topic. I guess I'll contribute here. So I was always at least a little bit red-pilled. Let's say I had some ground up bits of Flintstones red pills in my Kool-Aid from a very young age, because my dad was pretty conservative on most things.
My father was too, but I'd always argue with him.
I didn't argue with him. We didn't really talk politics, but some of the things that he believed were ingrained in me. It's a subconscious thing. Yeah, there were certain issues that I was conservative on that before I got like the official red pill. So for early part of high school, 9th and 10th grade, unfortunately I have to admit that I was like you. I was practically a socialist. It was because I wasn't really good at anything and I had low self-worth.
Yeah, that was exactly the same with me.
That's how people who have those traits, cope and deal with a world they know that they're going to lose in. So
yes, they want a system that is as much of an anathema to a sort of natural hierarchy as possible, don't they?
Yes, yeah, that's right. And I mean, you can pick any position, and I was probably left on that topic. But there was one aspect where I really went like off the deep end, like deep conservative. When I was maybe 17 or 18, and that was immigration. Because I had felt the effects of illegal immigration for years, and I had seen what illegal immigrants moving into my community had done to it. So I was deeply against illegal immigration from about the age of 18, I would say.
I see. I used to, for a very long time, I made a lot of justifications for mass immigration, and I try, even as a center left.
It's terrible.
Immigration has its utilities, doubtless, but
not illegal immigration.
Not illegal immigration. But back then, I would have probably. I think it was pro DACA. I did support Obama. Yeah, well, for me, the one thing I was always just intrinsically very ardently on the right on, and I still to this day I never really quite understand why. It was always with drugs for some reason. Back then I would have phrased myself.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I would have phrased.
Same here on that one.
Yeah, I would have phrased myself as a sort of as a phobic, because I bought into those phobic terms, and I would give that clarification in the way they would declare their pronouns. Now, well, I have this phobia towards just.
A narcophobic?
I guess. I never phrased it that way, but I just always had this deep-rooted abhorrence for substance abuse.
Well, there's a term about, I guess it was popular 5 to 10 years ago that would have encompassed this. It's called straight edge. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. It means no sex, no alcohol, no drugs.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well, it was, I don't know, it was kind of cringy, though, to use your word, because people would kind of use it to show, you know, how much better than you they were. Like, look, I can resist all these temptations. You guys, you know, you guys can't handle this.
But I,
you know,
I
that
can
kind
see
of
what
thing.
you mean. With alcohol, I'll partake in that in a community or in a communal setting or with friends and such. But I don't drink it on my own. So I wouldn't derive some sort of holier than thou pride over it, where well, I can control myself when it comes to.
Well, not everybody did, but I noticed it with the few straight edge people I was associated with. They kind of took a holier than thou approach. But moving on from that, yeah. So starting from about 18, I just drifted bit by bit from liberal to conservative, and I got to a point where I was, you know, an enlightened centrist. You know, I could see the merits and the value in both sides of the argument, and you know, so I was really on that
If I may ask a question,
part of the
this is
spectrum.
something
Sure.
I'm a little curious about because I didn't get articulate enough about it myself. But what role did let's say YouTube videos and those types of
Yeah, I'll get
in-
there. Yeah, I'll get there for sure.
Right.
Yeah. So when I was 23 or so, I had just slipped off the grid entirely. I did not care about politics. It didn't matter. It didn't matter who won or lost elections. I just didn't care at all. And this is where the YouTube videos started to come in, because even when I was kind of off the political grid, my, you know, values as a person were still in the background, kind of ticking more conservative. But I started watching YouTube videos, things like Ben Shapiro debates and Milo Yiannopoulos debates
Yeah.
and Gavin McInnes, and it wasn't that they were. It wasn't that I thought that they were geniuses. I did like their content,
I actually
and I
thought
thought
Ben
that they were
Shapiro was a
smart people.
genius back then. Embarrassingly.
He's a pretty smart guy, but I mean, we don't have the. Well, I mean, come on, he's fairly intelligent. He's fairly intelligent.
Oh, he's not. Sorry, I can't say that word. Well,
He's smarter than the average leftist.
yeah, that's true. That's true. I'll give.
All right, but the point was that in debates, I didn't know that that's what lefties believed. I didn't know that's how far
That's what it
come.
kind of was. So with me and GamerGate, when I was seeing that's when because I would have considered myself a feminist. I was looking at all these compilation clips and all these videos about feminism. Oh my goodness, these people are psychotic. They're crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's where it started to click in, or I didn't completely click in at that point. And I still wasn't really into the chess game of politics, as far as, you know, Democrats versus Republicans and things like that. So even at that point, as it was just starting to click in with me, I was still pretty anti-Trump. It wasn't that I loved Hillary or anything, but I just thought that it would be impossible for a reality TV star with no experience in politics to effectively run the country. So it was, I guess, what is that? It was the lesser of two evils argument that a lot of people had during that time.
Yeah, unless you were never Trumper. But I think it's a good segue into our next topic about Trump, that is, in the 2016 and the 2020 election.
Mm-hmm.
And if we supported Trump in 2016 and versus now as well. And I actually didn't support Trump leading up to 2016 either, embarrassingly enough. I was very...
Is it embarrassing?
Oh, yes. I was an ardent Ben Shapiro acolyte, and Ben Shapiro was a never Trumper. He was
Oh, right.
yeah, he dismissed the lesser of two evils argument out of hand. He said, no, never Trump. We must take a moral stand. Don't vote for him. He had a very long-winded reasoning, and I did find it compelling back then. He talked about, you know, the sort of the moral character of the Republican Party, and how if we get behind Trump, it'll take a very long time to recover from that. You know, how far we've allowed ourselves to descend just for the purposes of winning. These were sort of the arguments that he was giving back then that I bought into. Of course, there was his ulterior motives that I wasn't quite savvy to back then, which also...
Oh, right. Well, I mean, I don't know if we're even allowed to talk about ulterior motives like that, but if we are allowed to talk about them, we'll probably save that
for
a
different time for sure.
A different episode, because that'll probably take an hour and a half to discuss in and of itself. So we'll just say that Ben Shapiro wasn't completely genuine in his statements about being against Trump.
He was very genuine about
Or his
being,
reasoning.
Yeah, his reasoning, yes. And I think I was also quite big into Steven Crowder back then. I don't remember if he was also not too keen on Trump. I don't think he was never Trump, but he definitely wasn't a fan of Trump. He was
Right. Yeah, that's right. He was kind of on the fence.
yes, and I was back. That was my libertarian phase back then, and I remember for a lot of libertarian reasonings being against Trump, and I also remember Steven Crowder was also he presents himself as a conservative, but he's really more of a neoliberal with libertarian leanings in a lot of his positions, I think. Same with Ben Shapiro, at least back then. I don't know how he is now.
I don't really know how to classify their conservatism in specific terms, but I'll take your word for it. I know that both of them are a little bit more left leaning than others we listen to nowadays.
I think so, definitely, and definitely much more left leaning than myself on most, if not every arena of public discourse these days.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. Even for me, that they're a little bit too far to the left.
I think so, but so that leads up to 2016. Neither you nor I supported him, but after Trump got elected, when did you start supporting him?
Man, I don't know. I kind of halfway supported him through 2017. I don't know. I didn't really. So there were times when I really appreciated his demeanor and how, shoot from the hip, in your face he was. But there were also times when I thought he was less than tactful in how he went about his politicking, and so I couldn't ever fully support him because I thought that he wasn't presenting his case for certain things or the conservative case for certain things in the best way. He's not particularly eloquent, and there's a time and a place to be eloquent and to shoot from the hip like he generally does. I felt for a long time that he was just always just brash and a little bit too blunt on a lot of things. So yeah, I guess with policy I was on board with him, but himself, the way he was, it took a while to get on board with that.
I see. For me, and I absolutely see what you mean when it comes to the articulation. I think this is an often cited criticism of Trump, and it's probably one that it's definitely one I shared back with Ben Shapiro. I think, oh, why can't it be President Shapiro? Because he would much more convincingly present the conservative cause or conservative positions on positions. However, when it came to Trump, one of the reasons I didn't support him up until election day was I was quite black-pilled, and all the media was quite successful in blackpilling me. I thought there was zero chance he would win, and I was thinking that him winning the primary was the worst possible thing because it threw the election. But when he did win afterwards, I remember being both very surprised but also very relieved, almost immediately I started becoming a bit more enthusiastic about it. Now, of course, I still wasn't too keen in Trump's camp, but I was very happy to see that he managed to pull off quite a feat, I think. And I was looking forward to some of his policy proposals. And I think one of the ones that really grew on me very quickly was him being not as much of a war hawk as Hillary Clinton. I remember her leaked speeches that she was giving.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, and she was talking about all these horrifying policies with Syria that risked provoking a war with Russia again. It seems the neocon types tend to want to provoke a war with Russia every 10 years. It was just 10 years prior as well. Less than 10 years was. They almost provoked a war over South Ossetia and Abkhazia in the Caucasus.
Yeah, so the war hawk angle, I didn't really know anything about that. I didn't know enough about that to make any judgments on Trump's capacity to be a war hawk or Hillary's capacity to be a war hawk. I didn't really know enough about that. I just thought, I didn't really want to support Hillary, but
she was terrible.
I thought, she probably has a better grasp of what she's doing than Trump does. I thought that at the time.
I did think that, but I also thought that was more horrifying because I didn't want her. It would be one thing if she was incompetent, but if she knows what she's doing, that makes it even worse. I would say.
Yeah, she could game the system. I was smart enough to see things that way at the time.
Yeah, back then I still remember. I really didn't like her, and I did retain. And this is a topic maybe for another time as well. The disappearance of the anti-war left. I was on that when I was younger.
Oh right, yeah. They were the hippies, the peaceful, no war and all that
Yes,
stuff.
and it was,
I remember.
We
that
all
too.
didn't like the Afghanistan war, the Iraq war, but that seems to have completely vanished by the time Hillary Clinton came around in 2016, and she was advocating, war hawkish policies that would have really put her on par with John McCain himself.
Yeah. Well, what was that? I think she said it about Gaddafi. She said, "We came, we saw, and he died."
And at first,
it
was the laughter, and the interviewer looked so uncomfortable. Oh, okay.
Yeah, she seems to have no conscience on the matter. It just doesn't matter to her. It's just a bunch of pieces being moved on a board.
I don't remember the details so well, but wasn't there that massive scandal where the Clinton Foundation was embezzling funds that were supposed to go to helping Haitians after a natural disaster?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, that was long before
that.
2016. My memories of it are very fuzzy, but I remember there was a big controversy raised about that back. I was much younger back then, so that's why my memories are so fuzzy. But she's always...
Yeah, you're an old man now.
I'm still a Zoomer, millennial.
Yeah,
okay,
whatever.
millennial.
It doesn't matter. You're gonna be an old Zoomer. You are an old Zoomer. You're old for a Zoomer. You're old enough for a Zoomer that I am loath to even consider you a part of the generation.
I'm still a Zoomer though. At heart.
Whatever. Anyway.
You just want me to be a millennial, but
whatever. I don't care. I don't care.
Oh, you say you don't, but you seem quite...
you can be whatever you want, all right?
Well, it's not about what I want, it's about what I am, and I happen to be a Zoomer.
Yeah, but if you wanna stick feathers up your butt and call yourself a chicken, go for it.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be a chicken. I'd just be a man with feathers up his butt, but I am a Zoomer.
Yeah, well, anyway, I do want to get to another issue, not an issue with Trump, but something about him in regards to being more on his side. Was I never really watched the mainstream media. That was one of the reasons I wasn't that political for a long time, is because I didn't have any exposure to CNN or ABC News or any of those avenues for news. But I noticed, I don't have an exact time frame, but I did notice how doggedly they would be gunning for Trump, and how they would try so hard to cut him down at every conceivable angle and position, and how he would not flinch and he would just come back swinging. And in that sense, that sort of blunt approach, that's where I can easily appreciate it.
These days
because
I
a
really
lot of
appreciate
what
it.
CNN says, it's just a bunch of baseless character attacks that don't make a lick of sense. They're just saying words, non sequiturs. Nothing connects.
Oh, absolutely.
Their next sentence cannot connect with the one they just said. But a lot of people say Fox News is guilty of the same thing, and
they are.
I mean, I would agree, but that's one news station amidst a sea, this massive wave of other sources of mainstream media that are all pushing in the opposite direction. And so seeing how they went for Trump and how he was able to kind of brush it off and or fake news and sit down, Acosta, get out of here, we don't need you here, that really did a lot to get me on his side.
In retrospect and at present, I have the same appreciation that you describe. Back then, I didn't so much. I did notice the targeting of Trump. I also thought that Trump made it very easy for them. So I was still, again, in that Ben Shapiro camp where, he's just giving them ammunition, and this is, of course, going to turn a lot of the average voters against him, because they're going to see the press of him, with the grab them by the bleep tape, for example. Or
you can say that. That word is.
That's not a term I'm too used to saying.
Grab him by the pussy. There you go.
There you go. Yes, that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that.
I'm just not used to saying it so much as all that word.
All right. Well, anyway, please
continue.
Continue.
But yes. And so, let's see, where was I? Lost my train of thought here. Oh, yes, yes. And so.
Thinking about grabbing him by the pussy.
No. So back then I didn't appreciate it because I thought so optics are important, but optics aren't everything. You can focus too much on that. I was thinking hyper focus or too excessively focused on the optics, thinking, well, if Ben Shapiro had been there, he would have, they wouldn't have, because he's an Orthodox Jewish person, he's quite keen to a moral code that would make him exempt from a lot of these attacks. He'd also articulate himself better and so forth. Of course, that's not the case now, and we can see that's the case. How he melts down on occasions. And
yeah, there's one topic in particular that really sends him into a frenzy.
Oh, absolutely. A good few, but yeah, so that one in particular does. So yeah, let's see. Oh, right. So leading up to that, of course, at present, now that I've shifted a good deal more to the right, the last few years have been a very, very large shift for me, and they're a lot different now than I was just a few years ago. And so now, when I see Trump being able to really be unflinching in the face of a lot of these media attacks, and even turn it back on them, even, how shall I say, it's, as you described, denounce them as fake news, and I quite like how he handles his press conferences as well. He says, no, I didn't call on you, sit down. I'm asking that person. Or that one person asked him a very stupid question, and I thought that was a stupid question. I can't remember what it was, but then Trump remarked, what a stupid question. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I think that if you ask a lot of people, they're going to give you the same sort of trajectory. They hopped on YouTube, and Ben Shapiro had an in to, he's got corporate backing. He can get exposure. So, of course, he's going to be the first person a lot of people see. And he is articulate in the way he puts things. So, I think a lot of people would probably say that they also cut their teeth on Ben Shapiro videos or Milo Yiannopoulos, Steven Crowder. And then moving past that era, well, how did you move even farther?
So I started actually watching a whole lot of different channels, and so I started with Surgan, as I've mentioned. A lot of those skeptics as well. There's
yes, the skeptic community.
Indeed, I watched a whole bunch of them. So I was exploring around with different channels. I tried to prove what an enlightened centrist I was by listening to lefties as well. I listened to a little bit of secular talk. Listen to, I don't remember what all the other lefty channels.
They're so boring.
I know. Even back then they were just so boring. But
it was so boring.
They really are.
I tried. Even when I was on enlightened centrist, I was like, all right, I gotta give them a fair shake too, and I couldn't do it. They're just so boring.
They were just so boring.
I'm sure they have great points, is what I thought, but I just can't be bothered to listen to them because they're really mind-numbing.
Many of them are mind-numbing. A lot of them, it is innocuous as you can be, and why that is the case is very apparent in just the hypersensitivity of the audience, I suppose, or at least the intended audience, I think.
Yeah.
But so I started moving on to them, and I moved on to a lot of different channels on the right as well, because I had to prove that I was enlightened centrist. I listened to a lot of the more far-leaning right channels, and so unfortunately this included a lot of Wignats as well. But one of them that I still listen to, not a Wignat, he's not, but in 2017 I think it was, I started listening to that Nick J. Fuentes.
Oh yes, I know he's your favorite.
Well, he's a Zoomer. He's a good representative.
Is that why he's your favorite?
Well, he's able to direct his a presentation. It is his presentation, memes and post-ironic humor in a way that's very much to my Zoomer liking.
So, if he was a 57-year-old man who did everything exactly the same way, would you still...
I'd still like him. There are a 57-year-old man who does similar points, or not quite similar. He goes on his own topics. I think is that Ian Michaels Jones, Dr. Jones, if you will.
I actually don't know him.
He's a Catholic who does a lot of the history about the decline of Catholicism in the U.S.
Oh.
So he's
There's been a hell of a decline.
he gives a lot of very interesting talks. He talks about the subversion of the church. He talks about the Jesuits in New Jersey and so forth, operating on New Jersey. He's very interesting. He's a very well-articulated man. But that's a topic for another time, definitely. But so I did listen to... who were the Wignats I listened to back then? There was that Mike Enoch, I recall. The one that scared Sargon away in that one video. That was really quite funny.
I don't remember. I know the name. I don't really remember anything about him.
Yeah,
I know there was the one we talk about is James Alsop, right?
Well, James Alsop is a very interesting one. He could be described... Well, he is part of the TRS crowd now, so he's definitely veered more onto that. But originally, at least on his own YouTube channel before he got removed, he was a lot more... how shall I say? I don't want to say innocuous because that's not quite the right word, but he was definitely not quite into the TRS territory just yet. His videos seemed
more measured.
Measured. They kept presentability in mind. They were very accessible, and so they were also tailored to audiences that definitely would not be quite as, or as a way of introducing them to more elements of the further right, I think. But so I did listen to him back then too, and until he got purged, I was subscribed to him. Although,
oh yeah, okay. When was he purged? I don't remember.
I think it was 2019. It wasn't.
We got another series of purges going on, which reminds me, Jared Taylor. I'm sorry that you got banned off YouTube. That was messed up.
Yeah,
I like his videos.
American Renaissance. I think he's a very impeccably articulated man. He's very civil.
That's why they had to get rid of him.
Oh yes, absolutely. He's very presentable, and this also, I think, strikes against that stereotype. Well, anybody who's on the far right, they're just these, uneducated, should I say, ignorant, hateful. What's the word? I don't want to say hicks, but I guess they do like to say that word on the left anyways. Hicks would be the stereotype.
Oh yeah, no, anybody on the right's just a stupid redneck.
Exactly.
All the educated people vote left, they vote Democrat.
But here's this very well articulated man who is a doctorate, and he studied at Yale University, an Ivy League graduate, who's fluent in multiple languages and very well accomplished. You can't point to him and say, "Oh, look at this uneducated, backwards hick from." They always like to be bigoted towards the South as well.
That's true. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for that we don't have to get into at this moment. But yeah, it sounds like we had a similar journey, not exactly the same. But we hit a lot of the same beats on our way to where we're sitting right now.
Oh, absolutely. And I've definitely bounced around a good many points until I finally really landed in a more of an entrenched position where I'm a lot more constant. There's a lot more not invariance, but described earlier, much more entrenched belief system than before back, because I was a libertarian, and then I went full ANCAP, and then started flirting with more of the Wignat stuff for a little bit, and then thankfully got out of that stuff, and then bounced back to, I don't even know what that would be described.
Well, in any case, it's all a part of the journey, even your libertarian, ANCAP, Wignat phases. You need all of those building blocks to get to somewhere better. So it sounds like it was a worthwhile journey to have. I think you would more than happily advocate for everybody on the left to follow the same path as you, even if they dabbled in Wignat and ANCAP and all that stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry. Well, I was gonna say, since we were on the topic, I was gonna say we can shift over to the far left and discuss the modern communist.
Ooh. And so,
yeah,
I think that's a great pivot, actually.
Oh yes, it's even better of a pivot when you mentioned how great of a pivot it was.
Oh yes, indeed. So that's my autism coming out, I suppose.
That's fine. Just go ahead. This is a topic we agreed to discuss on this episode because of a little meme you came across on your Facebook feed, I believe. So why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory on just that meme and why it captured your attention?
So that meme reminded me of something that I've been noticing for a good while. But that particular meme was a subversion meme, and it presented two photos. So I could immediately tell it was a subversive meme because one photo said capitalism, and it was a picture of Pyongyang, specifically. This, I think it's called the Science City of Pyongyang, which is a district inside of it. And then it showed a picture of Detroit and said communism. I immediately didn't even scroll down and look. Okay, I already know where this is going. It's going, aha, you thought it was, you thought that the city was capitalism, but it's actually backwards. See, communism does work, and capitalism creates terrible societies. It just, they stole the right meme of, here's a picture of Venezuela, and here's a picture of, I don't know, the city of London. And so and I scrolled down, and yeah, it's exactly what it was. And then they were saying, oh yeah, I can't even remember what the most ridiculous quotes they were pulling from there. But there was, oh yeah, capitalism only creates everything's filth under capitalism except for the shopping mall or something.
Yeah, capitalism is a city where everything is shit except for the shopping malls.
Yeah, exactly. And my first thought is, none of you would want to live in Pyongyang. That's what really...
Is it Pyongyang or Pyongyang?
I thought it was Pyongyang.
I thought it was Pyongyang.
You can pronounce it either way, I suppose, but I always call it Pyongyang.
I think Pyongyang's right.
I'll just keep saying Pyongyang.
All right.
Because I was wondering, when did it come to the point that people on the left are pointing towards Pyongyang and citing that as a glowing example of the society they want to build?
Yeah. I mean, past the subversive meme, which is... it's indicative of the tricks that they have to use in order to convince people to jump onto their side.
Well, I like the idea. I think it's a clever idea because you want to, how do I say, catch their attention, and once you show them that their perceptions are incorrect, at least if they were not deceiving them, then that would be quite a convincing meme, I think.
Yeah, but they have to lie. Well, one of the things I noticed about that meme was that the picture of Detroit, they got in real nice and close to show the dilapidated buildings and everything. And I know that the Science City in Pyongyang is a nice place considering it's in North Korea.
North Korea has its
but
elite.
if you took that same angle, like zoom in and add a little bit more detail, a little bit more clarity, like they did with the Detroit photo, I don't think that you would. It wouldn't resonate as much. It might look nicer.
Well, I think
Detroit,
you would want to know the social structure. What a nightmare it is to live in Pyongyang, for example.
Well, they don't want to present that.
Oh, of course.
They just want to show you the shiny, tall skyscrapers. They don't want to show you. They don't want to get in deep and be honest about it. So it's not exactly the meme itself. It's how it's presented. There's a dishonest trick
that's very true.
Being used there.
Absolutely, and I think even more pressing is that they won't go outside of Pyongyang. Parts of North Korea where they're living under serfdom, effectively, where beef once a year is you only see beef once a year. It's a luxury, and they've never seen a cell phone in their whole lives, and yet that's the society they're advocating as a bastion of a beacon of success for communism. We should emulate it.
I've heard of the most horrible examples you can dream of, like kids living out in the countryside who are fighting over a single kernel of corn that's in a lump of horse shit or something.
Oh jeez, I haven't heard that one, but I wouldn't doubt it.
It's really an awful place to live. I mean, on top of that, they don't have Starbucks and they don't have designer goods, and let me tell you, the one thing, I know this is going to break your heart, they don't even have Funko Pops.
I knew you were going to say that.
I didn't even have
Apple.
Funko Pops.
Yeah, that's...
All right, so I really... It's I consider it to be it's a bunch of bullshit. They don't actually believe that North Korea is a preferable place to live as opposed to the United States.
Too much about it. They just see this picture of a beautiful looking city, and I don't think they know too much about North Korea. And I think, so there are two types of communists, and there are communists I can respect intellectually, who are very well researched, very coherent, and they're very consistent, and I can respect them, as I mentioned, as an intellectual. But most of them, the great majority of communists, and I know far more of this sort than the other, the most uninitiated, most ad hoc, impulsive, ill-read, just larpers almost. They're not really ideological even. They're just resentful. As Ted Kaczynski wrote, that it's about what's the word I'm looking for? Not self-consciousness, but this inferiority complex. That's what I'm looking for. And it's just them lashing out, and they're gravitating towards something that allows them, or sort of is or they can use that as a means by which to lash out or to justify their own lot in life, and also for their very real failings and shortcomings. That is, their negative, very, I would say, outright evil, what's the word I'm looking for, externalities that they inflict on society and other people.
They can definitely be useful idiots to this, mob mentality, while also at least pretending to smooth out their own incompetence that they can't admit to, because I think if you've asked,
they all think they're geniuses.
They all think that they're just misunderstood geniuses. If they had only had the means to express that genius, like if they only had those billions in Bezos' bank account, they'd be able to change the world.
See, if they were leading the communist revolution. But it doesn't even have to be communism. I think it's because it's a popular underculture. At least it was an underculture. Now it seems to be quite sanctioned by many dominant institutions these days. But while it was something that naturally gravitated people. But had fascism, and I mean actual fascism, not the meme of everything being fascist, but the doctrine of fascism, Giovanni Gentile's actual idealism, had that been the popular undercurrent in society for these sort of dispossessed or sort of lost youths with a lot of energies to burn, I think all these communists, they would probably be, they might be phalangists, or instead of, what is it? I'm a Kropotkin communist. I'm a a black communist. I'm an ANCAP, or I'm a Tanky. I'm a Stalinist, or whatever. You'd have, I'm a Rexist. I'm a phalangist. I'm a metoxist, and I think that's what you would see.
That's a great point too. It's not about being a communist. It's just having some sort of idea that everybody can hang their hat on and march forward towards tearing down everything that they see as a hindrance or an obstacle to their true greatness.
Oh, absolutely, and they just like to pick and choose the parts of Marxism or communism that they do like, and that's why you'll see this popular, gravitation towards Maoism now, because Maoism is a little bit more in line with what they do like, and they look towards the Cultural Revolution, for example, where they abolished rent, so to speak, by killing all the intelligentsia.
And they declared war on sparrows and lost.
Oh, yeah. They followed in the footsteps of the Aussies. Don't wage war on birds is the lesson there.
I think history has taught us enough about waging war on birds.
Indeed. But, what was it? Oh, yes, and so now you have a lot of these individuals, and through their own failings, in the most part, I would say, and I do make this point a lot, that millennials tend to be very bad with money. Now they find themselves with a very visceral animosity towards the rent bill that comes every week, and so they look towards the communists in China, who were killing landlords, the landlord class, back during the Cultural Revolution, and they think, well, that's the part of communism they do like. And so now they're Maoists rather than Marxists, or will be another iteration of it, or ANCAPs or what have you, and such.
It's interesting that you bring up that matter on rent, because there was a story in the news recently about a black guy who was shacking up with somebody in Connecticut. They were sharing the rent for this room. They were
The Last Samurai.
Space. It's from the Memology 101. That's where I get my news now. I can't trust CNN, so I get it from some chill.
He was pretty good on the whole Chaz situation, which is a great topic.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I mean, he's worth watching. So I mean, if you want to go check out his channel, Memology 101, it's a great channel. Check it out while you still can, because I'm sure it's gonna get banned.
Well, that would make YouTube racist. So I think he's from some
He's
sense.
Chilean.
No, that's Dame Pesos.
I thought Dame Pesos was a
No,
Mexican.
Dame Pesos is Chilean, and I think Memology is, I want to say Honduran. He's from one of those
A
countries.
Mexican?
No, he's not.
They're all Mexicans to me.
They all
Anyway.
call themselves Mexicans jokingly.
Yeah, well, they're all Mexicans to me. Anyway, the black guy whose name was Jerry, I don't remember his last name, but he took a samurai sword and hacked off this old white guy's head because he didn't want to pay rent anymore. And
Well, he wasn't paying rent at all, and the gentleman, his name was Victor. He was calling in calling in the tab, so to speak, saying, "Look, you got to pay the rent finally, or I'm going to evict you. I'm going to kick you out." They were sharing. It was a rent. They were sharing the same place. He wasn't paying.
Yeah.
They were both paying rent, but he was covering the whole tab. Was the thing.
The main point of this story, I mean, it of course it's a vicious, brutal action and a horrible crime. The guy should go to jail for, up until the point where he's executed. But there are a lot of people who are hailing this murderer as a hero because he spoke truth to power. He didn't want to give in to the corrupt system of paying rent, and he fought back. And people are asking, how they can help contribute to his bail so he can be released from prison, and hashtag free Jerry, whatever his name is.
Well, they're the same sort that I described, and they're living vicariously through him in a sense, or at least that's why they like him. It's not so much because, as you mentioned, it is a savage act, and it is a brutal murder, and he's by no means a good person. And in fact, I don't think they would want to, reside in the same dwelling as him, even.
Oh, of course not.
But in their case, they are all paying rent, and they have this resentment build up towards the person they're paying rent to, and so they're superimposing their own context onto this story without really giving it much thought. And so now they're thinking, oh yeah, this man did what I want to do. And that's why I say a lot of these people aren't really ideological. They're just, unfortunately, the exact opposite in a sense. I like to use the term somatics or hylics.
And that's the key point, is that they don't see that and think that's a terrible thing. They decide that that's a moral thing to do, or maybe not moral, but again, it's enacting their fantasy, the fantasy that they can't realize because they're all too weak to even pick up the samurai sword. And it shows that their morality is completely it's completely malleable.
Absolutely. Their morality is
it.
tailored to their anger and their impulses. It's nothing but instinct, impulse. It's all primeval for them. That's why I use the term hylic. They've severed themselves from their capacities for metacognition and for greater meta-awareness of their own conditions, let alone the exercise of will.
And that's why you all should be far-right conservatives, because over here we got a stable morality that doesn't change. It stays fixed. What is bad is bad.
Oh, if you're a real conservative.
And what is good is good.
Not if you're a Republican, but...
Oh, what was
if
that?
you're a real conservative, not a... Excuse me.
Oh, they're not conservatives.
Well, they call themselves that, is the thing.
I don't care what they call themselves. They can stick feathers up their butt and call themselves chickens for all I care.
Well, that's true, but right now they are doing that, and they are calling themselves Republicans. Or, sorry, they are calling themselves conservatives, but they are far from it. And they'll to give the argument, or to humor their argument, if this is what they would articulate, is that, well, they're talking about American conservatism. So they're talking about conservatism in a very literal sense, where it just means conserving what was there, which tends not to be what conservatism actually is about, but that's how so it gets into a sort of a semantics quibble is, I think, the right word.
Well, I would say that they don't even fulfill that definition. What was there? I mean, there's
their definition,
at least a few dozen statues that were there that aren't there because partially because of their failure to stand up and...
So you're not thinking as a big-brained centrist now. So for them, they're talking...
Thank God.
Yeah, I know. They're talking about conservation of anything. They're just talking about being libertarian. So in their eyes, conservatism is libertarianism, except for foreign policy. For some reason is excluded.
And, when we talk about that, I mean, they're the best we have right now. We don't really have anywhere else to go at this point in time. So, I mean, how do you keep going knowing that you really don't have much representation at all? There are very few Republicans that are actually conservative?
Well, I think for all people, it's always about setting an example and always being active. And everybody exists in their own little worlds, and I don't use that. What I mean by that is, our own little spheres of existence, our contacts, our networks, and such. And by setting an example, reaching out, and trying to make the little worlds around us a little better, I think that's really the best option. When good men do nothing is when evil thrives, of course. And I think people also gravitate towards exemplars of morality and such. A lot of people, at least, you'll have those who are quite fallen and they'll want to destroy you for that, but that's just a sign or an indication that you're doing something right, I would say. When it comes to the Republican Party itself, it has to be a very gradual change, very small. You're not just going to take over the party in a single electoral term, as we've found out with Trump's election. And you're definitely not just going to be able to subvert the party as easily as some people would like to have you believe either. What you really have to do is be consistent. So, taking the lesser of two evils, as it were, but also gradually changing the cultural landscape or the discourse or the small little world around you. And if enough people do that, of course, that can, I think, snowball, or what's what I'm looking for, manifest into something self-perpetuating. I think. Yeah, I absolutely think that.
So, in the short term, do you support the Republicans? I mean, do you actually support them, or do you just pick them as the lesser of two evils?
More often than not, it's the lesser of two evils. There are some Republicans I would say I actually do support, but there are few in number, and two, unfortunately, few in number. But with the way the Democrats are now, even though there are some Democrats that I think are, Tulsi Gabbard's a good example. That I like her on foreign policy.
Big Tulsi Gabbard fan.
Yeah, she's cool, but well, I don't agree with her on everything.
You're a big Tulsi Gabbard fan. I think she's all right, but you.
Oh yeah,
you've been singing her praises for.
Yeah, because she was a revival of the sort of anti-war left, and there's not even an anti-war right. Although I think it would be a naturally conservative position to. It's not to be what's the word I'm looking for, isolationist, but it would be to only engage in foreign policy insofar as it's beneficial to the constituents, I think. But that's a different matter. But even if I did support her, I couldn't vote for her. Under no circumstances right now can a Democrat be voted for. You look at the Democrats are advocating, just how radical, how insane they've gotten just in the last 4 years. They've gone deranged. They're talking about, what is it? They were already talking about open borders, but now it's also, they were talking about open borders. Beto O'Rourke is now pushing in the direction of we're just going to take everyone's firearms, and then you have he was pushing that.
Yeah, I remember that.
Not to mention
hell yeah, we're going to take your guns.
Yeah, he was desperate. But then you have reparations, which even at the start of this electoral terms was seen as quite radical. Was that one primary candidate, I can't remember his name because he was so inconsequential, who was trying to be as radical as he could to try to garner some support. He was really pushing reparations. He was seen as a bit of a radical for that, and now the whole Democrat Party seems to have embraced reparations. And then you have, of course, pushing all this trans stuff and all this other stuff, and kids' education, pushing it in schools, trying to expose children to it. You have this rejection of biology. You have CNN saying individuals with cervixes need to start getting cancer screenings. They don't even say women need to get, are at risk for cervical cancer. They're saying individuals with cervixes. It's
you're not allowed to use gendered language at all.
Oh yeah, it's just nutty, and it just gets worse and nuttier and nuttier. Now it's what is it? We need to start first I remember it was abolish ICE. Abolish any sort of enforcement of immigration laws, and now it's abolish the police.
Yeah, it did get there pretty quick.
Yeah, and it just keeps rapidly getting increasingly extreme. Not to mention abortions up until the day of birth, abortions forever. We're going to pay you to have abortion. Okay, they're not doing that, but I wouldn't surprise me.
Hey, we'll give it a while.
Yeah.
6-7 months.
Oh, that's
especially if
no, you don't get it. As they would say around 2010, 2012, that's a slippery slope fallacy.
Oh, the slippery slope. Oh, man. that they got a lot of mileage out
They
of
really did.
shaming everybody for the slippery slope, and then it turned out to be the slipperiest of slopes.
It really did. Everything that was feared seems to be coming to fruition now. You know, first, even with the trans, that was, oh, it's just bathrooms. Just let them use the bathroom. Now it's in your education.
Yeah.
Now your children are... now there's...
I'll just take the estrogen pills. Jesus.
Yeah,
they're just pills.
Oh,
we're just going to cut your genitals up. God. Complain all the time.
Yeah,
Jesus.
it's starting to get to that point. You have cases now where there's that terrifying case. I can't remember the name. It was in Texas where the mother and father were separated, and the mother was imposing on the son that you are a girl, and they were going to take the kid to start getting hormone treatments, and the father was desperately fighting for custody, full custody, so she couldn't do this, saying, declaring this was child abuse, because it was. He says that when the son is with me, he's not confused at all. He sees himself as a boy, but the mother is pushing this on him.
Well, it's an indoctrination into a cult, because that's what it is.
Yes, and not to mention that you can start giving kids hormone treatments, which you can never undo the damage of that sort of thing either. It's nuts.
And the lengths to which they're willing to take this kind of education in elementary school, like they're actively and openly sexualizing children now, and to quote the
immortal words of Samuel Hyde, Dr. Hyde, if you will, they're sexualizing now, and it's getting to a point where even I have a problem with it. It should be like that.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. That's actually really funny that you mentioned that, because I know a lot of people who live, let's just say, somewhat degenerate lifestyles. They partake in drug use and promiscuity and these sorts of things, and they're talking to me now, and they're saying, Jesus, I think I gotta go back to church. These people are insane. I'm not gonna be a part of this anymore.
Well, that's the thing. The moral character, the moral arterial, and the beating heart of American society has greatly waned, and you're starting to see what the world looks like without Christianity. You're starting to really understand what America was before the Christians came. And if you know about, I can tell you stories. I've traveled around and heard stories about the Aztecs, and I was in Tenochtitlan not too long ago, actually, and they were telling this story about an Aztec warrior who wanted to become an elite in this Tenochtitlan city. And they told him he has to take his warriors and go and kill off some warring neighboring tribe that they're with. And he succeeded. And so then they told him he has to do this ritual. And so he married one of the elites of this city. And then he took his wife to these priests, where they skinned her, I think alive. They skinned her alive, and part of the ritual was he had to go and wear his now dead wife's skin around for a day. This is the kind of societies that existed before Christianity. It's not to mention the mass sacrifices and all sorts of other horrifying rituals that were being practiced.
But that's just, that's culture, man. No culture is better than another. They're all equally valuable, man.
Well, there is an objective morality. Now, of course, there's a great deal of variance for a moral culture that it can take, of course. Now, I was talking about this with another individual, actually, about tattoos, how I don't like tattoos at all, but, in Polynesian cultures, tattoos are regarded as quite a good thing, and they have a storied history of being what warriors wore. And I have, that's a faraway land in a different culture. I have no desire to change that. It's not immoral to practice tattoos, at least not strongly immoral. Now, you can point to...
But you wouldn't import that into your own culture. You wouldn't adopt that as a part of your own culture. So you're making a judgment call that's saying, that's your culture, but in the context of this culture that we live in, getting facial tattoos is not going to fly.
But there's a fine distinction that is to be made. There's a difference between it wouldn't fly in my culture versus it is morally, de facto, objectively evil what they're doing.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
And
yeah, a lot of well, I mean, there's things that we just know are immoral and are evil. Skinning your wife and wearing her skin is... That's pretty bad. There's not a lot of justification.
Just for the purposes of rising through the ranks in society as well. If you want to become an elite.
Yeah.
It's
and well, this culture that we're currently heading toward, I think it's time to take a U-turn. And
Yes, they've become debased from all morality, and that's the thing they don't really realize either. These traces of morality from a different system that they still adhere to, of course, it starts waning little and little, or rather little by little, in different peoples, more so than others, and that's why they're seeing other people who've gone much further down the road of what it really means to have no morality. Now, and that's what I always point out too. What makes something good or bad, and you'll have very long ones. Some people are quite how shall I say, educated on the matter and do try to come out. Sam Harris is a popular example of somebody who would try to come with this, how do I say, absurdly long-winded system where they try to, or Stephen Mullen is another one, where they try to rationalize objective morality, but still without any sort of Christianity or even religious, I should say, backing or foundation to it.
Yeah, they're pretty big-time atheists. They're some of the more prominent atheists in the intellectuals community, I guess. And yeah, they do go pretty far with trying to get rid of God while keeping the moral framework.
That reminds me, to
society.
just a slight tangent on looping back to our first topic. There was that phase where I was a big atheist, and I read Christopher Hitchens. I was quite big into him. I read God Is Not Great and so forth. And
what's that one guy's name? The English guy, Dawkins?
There's a lot. Christopher Hitchens was also English.
He wrote a book called The God Delusion or something, and that's like this. Yeah, I forgot his first name, but that was held up as like the gold standard for atheist thinking for quite some time. I think he even admitted that religion is important, though. Like, you couldn't just, throw it out the window and expect things to just keep.
Well, they always
there is
saw it as a utility, I would say, and there are a lot of people who have this view with even if they're not religious, they'll see a utility in the pervasive presence of religion for what you describe, what the systemic effects of it, or systemic influences it manifests into.
Sure, yeah.
There's also why you have cringe pagans, by the way, so a similar mindset.
Oh, Jesus, cringe pagan. We didn't even get to Odin.
Oh, jeez.
What do you think about Odin?
So the reason why is they want more of a warrior religion. They think, right. the Vikings and Odin, and which belies the point, or is I don't know if belie is the right word, but it's completely against the point of having a religion to begin with. You don't just pick and choose if you're religious. It's because, as I am with Christianity, you do. Sorry, a bit of a hiccup there. You do sincerely believe it. It's not just pick and choose. Oh, I like Odin's the coolest, so I'm gonna pick Odin, and I'm gonna pick.
You love Odin.
Yeah, I watched Avengers, and Thor was cool, so I'm gonna erect an altar to Thor and worship. It's just stupid. Sorry, I don't mean to be so blunt about it, but
no, it's okay. No, it's stupid. I think anybody who listens to this, they'll be the type of person who agrees that worshipping Odin or Thor or Zeus is pretty stupid.
Because they don't actually believe in it. It's just this bizarre, I'm doing it because, you have lefty pagans and then, the Wignat pagans. They're different. But the Wignat pagans is, the white man needs the warrior religion. It's actually a sentiment that Hitler had himself, that he didn't like Christianity because he thought it did not, he very much appreciated what he described the warrior religion of the Japanese. And he wanted a religion that could instill or inspire similar from the German people. And he thought Christianity was an anathema to that it made Germans weak.
That's interesting because, historically, Christians are willing to, go to war for God. They'll protect it.
Oh.
They'll protect the faith.
Oh, absolutely. And I can't remember his name right now, but a great book about the path towards that, the origin of the idea of crusade. You're best looking for. You're going to pay a lot if you want to buy that book, though. I don't know why it's so expensive these days.
That's you can recommend more books.
We should create a book list. I think
Well, we can have a book list, but we'll leave all that for down the road. We're running up against our normal, allotted time for one of our Red Weather Radio podcasts, so we'll start to wrap things up for today. Are there any closing thoughts you have before we we head out?
I guess just to try to synthesize all the points we've talked about. Ultimately, everyone is capable of a lot more than they realize. You just have to. Your legs will carry you to any destination you want. You just have to trust in them and disregard the thoughts of futility or doubt, shall we call them. And so don't try to ascribe or what's what I'm looking for. Bet all of your lot or your entire lot in life as improving because of some massive sweeping change through a socialist revolution, when you can just take action at any point and better yourself, better the world, the little world around you, be an example to other people, and you'll find that you'll be much more satisfied than just sitting around every day doing nothing but smoking illegal substances and
Buying Funko Pops.
And ranting about how we need a revolution.
Well, I think that's a very inspirational message to end on. I'm Vertigo. This is Beat. This is Red Weather Radio. And we'll see you next time.